Hello there BookTube, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel Guilty Feet. I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do a quick tag. This is the big book tag. This was originally a video made by Swearingen. And then there was some kind of late night drunk dial episode with Steve Donahue. I think we all hope he gets the help he needs, where he forced her to weaponize her video and turn it into a tag. And I think just for everyone's sake, we should all go ahead and do this tag and just pray for the best possible outcome. So I picked 3 books. I've tried, Shelley mentioned A Little Life, which is a fantastic book, and Steve responded to that. There are some other obvious classics, which I don't know. I'm going to get Count of Monte Cristo and War and Peace and Anna Karenina. I double check all of those. Absolutely fantastic. I've tried to pick 3 books which so far I don't think anyone's mentioned, because I always like to expand the conversation a little bit. So yes, all those books are fantastic. There are many more fabulous books. Trollope has written several books over 800 pages, some of which I've read. Here are 3 other books that all qualify as mammoths, which I believe is arbitrarily set at around 800 pages, although there's plenty of room for flexibility. And here are my 3. The first one I want to talk about is The Instructions by Adam Levin, which clocks in at a massive 1,030 pages, all set in one day. This was originally so I've got a UK edition published by Canongate. This was published by what's his face's press, not The Believer, what's it called, McSweeney's in the US. It's an astonishing book, and in many ways I recommend this book, knowing that actually the group of people to whom it is addressed and who I believe will get the most out of it is quite small, and almost all of them I already know, because it's a very esoteric. I'm often use the word accessible when talking about books. This may be the least accessible, or may not be. Tell me if you've read this and you love this. For me, it reads very Jewish, very a certain kind of Jewishness. If I met Adam Levine, we would probably have several aspects of our background in common, and I have a set of friends who we either studied or didn't study in Jewish day schools. I didn't, but a lot of my friends did. I did until I was 7, and then I went to a non-Jewish school. But then I studied in a seminary after high school, before going back and studying in university. And this is about a young boy, a 10-year-old boy called Gurion Maccabee, who has been expelled. Excuse me, my nose. Been expelled from 3 Jewish day schools and is now in a special lockdown program with other misfits. Gurion is an exceptional young man who believes that he might also be the Messiah. It is a crazed, bonkers, very heavily Jewish inflected, but possibly heretical, but from love, not because it's determined to turn the world upside down, but just from the idea that actually part of being this kind of Jew means turning the world upside down. I say very hard to explain, very hard to encourage other people to whom this may be utterly opaque to read this. But this was an astonishing, joy-filled, bonkers, madcap reflection, I think, of large parts of my life, or a life that I've known. The Instructions by Adam Levin. I haven't read any of his other books, so there's Hot Pink, and then recently, in the last 10 years, he's published more since. This I believe was his debut novel, and has had anniversary editions put out by McSweeney's and is still very fondly remembered. I don't know if anyone's reading it these days. I don't know if in the wider world of BookTube anyone's come across The Instructions, but if I'm going to recommend 1,000+ page books, it's nice to be able to bring this up. Some of the reviews sort of name check David Foster Wallace. I think this is in a slightly different register. Yet maybe there is some overlap, but this, I think, is, as a novel, I love Foster Wallace's non-fiction. I think Infinite Jest, which I had a profound impact on me. I think is flawed. I think this is perhaps more coherent in its 1,000 pages. Anyway, that's the instructions by Adam Levin. The next book is an author who is a kind of sort of cult hero to some. So there are those that have read him exhaustively since he was first publishing. I'm not that, but I have read a bunch of his stuff. But this was the first book of his that I came across. And again, mostly unmentioned on BookTube. So interested to hear if there are other Neal Stephenson fans. The book I'm talking about is Cryptonomicon. So famous earlier in his career for books like Snow Crash, which I didn't read. This was his first book that I read because it was already sort of, when it was published, it was already considered sort of a cultish book. And I believe I picked this up. You remember in the old days when you used to go to big record stores and they would also have a book section? So you go into a record shop and you could buy records or DVDs. Well, even in my day, the records were a niche section. There was a lot of DVDs, and which you don't even get anymore, I guess. But they would always have a T-shirt section, and they had a book section. And I think I bought this in HMV, which was one of the, I don't even think exists anymore, one of the big record stores in central London. This is Cryptonomicon. Maybe it's dated, it's certainly in terms of the tech in this book, it might be totally outdated, but it's a book about currency and high tech and spies and crazy things going on, and actually how the world works, and early cryptography, or at least early, not early in the high speed world, not early in the sort of Second World War era. But yes, it touched on all of that as well. Now, what's amazing about Cryptonomicon, first of all, it's an amazing read, very exciting. He then, after this, Stephenson published a 3-volume series, often referred to as the Baroque cycle. Each of those books is about 900 pages. I've got them all in hardback and I read them all. And it's a kind of retelling of Cryptonomicon. So he's mythologized his own fiction and retold the entire story, set in the 17th century. So at the very birth, so one of the major characters is Isaac Newton. And so if this is talking about cryptography and how currency is, and whether it's backed by gold, or whether it really exists, or whether it's all a fantasy, in the Baroque cycle, we have Isaac Newton trying to regulate coinage in a time where people would cut bits off. A gold coin was worth its weight in gold, and people would, but it would have a stamp, this is worth 1 guinea, and then people would shave bits off it, melt it down, and make a new coin. So from the 1 guinea coin, you got 1 big guineas, and there was Isaac Newton took over the Royal Mint in order to regulate currency throughout the land, and then everything that goes on in here kind of has a quality. Weirdly, some of the characters in this book, which is set in the, I guess, late 20th century, show up several centuries earlier. It is mind-expanding, mind-bending craziness. You don't need to read Cryptonomicon to read all 2,700 pages of the 3-volume, or I think it's supposed to be 9 volumes, but it was actually published in whatever it is, that Baroque cycle. I found my experience reading those 3 massive mammoth books enriched by the fact that I'd read Cryptonomicon. That said, I haven't exhaustively followed Neal Stephenson. His other book that I read after that was a book called Reamde, Reamde, a misspelling of Read Me, which was also a high-tech, globe-spanning spy techno thriller, which is just the most fun you can have. For, I guess, fans of Ready Player One, I haven't read any of the Andy, what's his face, the Martian, Andy Weir, Martian Hail Mary. I know there's a super popular, has sold millions. I think Stephenson is working in a slightly, highbrow is not the right word, slightly less populist vein of those things. I understand why they've been huge success. I love the movie of The Martian. Neal Stephenson, I think, is perhaps unfair. I haven't read Andy Weir. Even more rewarding, and the depth is there. And so much of this went over my head, but it was just thrilling and fun and mad to read. And I recommend Neal Stephenson. If you're only going to read one Neal Stephenson, I think this. But if you decide to read further, there is a richness there. He's one of the world's most brilliant writers, and he's still publishing, and he's trying different genre and doing different things. Cryptonomicon is bonkers and super rewarding. And then the last mammoth. How many pages is this? This was high 800s, nearly 900 pages. And then the last mammoth that I'm going to suggest is perhaps one that's been discussed in more detail on BookTube, and that is Daniel Deronda by George Eliot, which I adored. Came to me at a time when I didn't know what I was getting. So I had read when I was 18, 19 years old, and I finished high school, and I was coming to Israel for a year to be on kibbutz with a bunch of my friends. And one of the books my English teacher recommended was Middlemarch. And I'm 18 years old. I'm planning to study literature at university. I'm taking some time off before university, and I brought Middlemarch with me and read it on kibbutz, and the book fell apart, and I got passed around, and other people read it at my, and I came back and bought another copy, which also fallen apart, not because I read it, I lent it to my mother. And Middlemarch is, people rave about as one of the most spectacular novels in the world, and it genuinely was at the time. I was 18 years old when I read it. But a couple of years later, in looking to read more Eliot, I came across Daniel Deronda. I had no idea when I started this book that I knew it was about a character called Daniel. I had no idea. The date that I've written in this book is January 94. I came to live in Israel in January 96. The seeds were already planted. I already knew. I'd been in Israel for 2 years, in 87 to 89, and had gone back to study. So I was married by the time I read this book. We already knew that our plans were to move to Israel. To encounter a work like this about a character who comes to a greater understanding of his Jewish identity and comes to relate that to a desire to move to Israel, and the sort of, before there was a word for Zionism, what George Eliot is expressing here through Daniel Deronda is this idea of that one's religion and one's faith is expressed through peoplehood, through self-determination, through a community beyond what he was able to find in the land of his birth. This was in the months, and a year, 18 months that I was planning to leave my family behind and move to Israel, encountering a reflection of that from 150 years earlier in Daniel Deronda was a very powerful and moving time for me. It happens to be a beautiful book. So to me, I enjoyed this more than Middlemarch, probably my favorite George Eliot. I've informally suggested that 2026 is going to be my year of rereading, but it's supposed to be a fun project. I don't reread. I know I'm supposed to, and I don't. Even all these great classics and things and books that I've read over the years, and I've assigned this in my head. I've assigned the books that I'm going to reread. Some of the books I'm going to reread, I want them to be fun and light and pick up and put downable, and maybe I won't even finish. Like I don't DNF anything, but maybe if I'm rereading something, I could just get the meat of it, enjoy something, jump forward a couple of chapters, read something else. I really want it to be a new way of looking at some of the books I've read. But one of the books that I am considering rereading is this giant mammoth, Daniel Deronda, because 30 plus years ago, as I say, this didn't inspire me to leave my family and travel to the other side of the planet, but there were some parallel thoughts across the centuries being expressed, which I say had a powerful effect on me. George Eliot's Daniel Deronda, that is my third mammoth book, and I highly recommend all three of these. So that's Daniel Deronda, Cryptonomicon by Neal Stephenson, and the incredible Gurion Maccabee, Star of the Instructions by Adam Levin. Have a great weekend. God bless. Bye.